for northern areas, but it should stay largely dry. Away from the northwest, though, where once again we can expect some outbreaks of rain. And into next week, high pressure sticking around. So once again, lots of fine, settled weather and some sunshine. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News. This is a show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority, and what a show we've got for you tonight. A quite extraordinary evening in world news because, as you might have seen, Donald Trump and leader of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, had an explosive row in the Oval Office in the White House today, leading to the Ukrainian leader to walk out of those peace talks in Washington. Check this out.
You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Remarkable scenes. President Zelensky arrived in Washington, D.C. to sign a $500 billion mineral deal and work towards peace in Ukraine, but Trump basically wiped the floor with him in front of the world's media. Watch this.
Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
I mean, this is an enormous story in world affairs. It's really the only story in town tonight, and we're going to bring you the very latest over the next hour. State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, political commentator Armand Bogle and media strategist Andy Twelves. As ever, let me know your views on that big story. I want to hear from you at gbnews.com/your say, and of course on X at GoodwinMJ. But first, let's get to the news with Aaron Armstrong.
Very good evening to you. Aaron Armstrong here with the latest headlines. Was only one place to start, and that is the White House, because Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky have clashed in a bad-tempered meeting. Donald Trump has called Ukraine's president disrespectful, warning Volodymyr Zelensky he's gambling with World War III. What had been seen as a crucial meeting for Ukraine to obtain security guarantees as part of any deal to end the war with Russia quickly descended into a shouting match, with Trump telling Zelensky, "You either make a deal or we are out." Trump continued by telling the Ukrainian president he's in no position to dictate, that it will be very hard to do business like this, and that he should be thankful. Trump has since posted on social media that Zelensky's not ready for peace, but he can come back when he is.
Not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky has since left the White House early following that fiery meeting. The two leaders were to hold a news conference this evening. That's been cancelled, and Trump's team have confirmed the rare minerals deal, which Ukraine hoped would provide some security guarantees, has not been signed. The Kremlin has described the meeting simply as historic. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says it's disappointing to lose a good colleague over the foreign aid budget, but the decision to increase spending on defence is right. The Minister for Overseas Development, Annalise Dodds, has resigned after the Prime Minister made the decision to slash the foreign aid budget. The money will be used to boost defence spending to 2.5% of GDP instead. In a resignation letter, Ms Dodds said the cuts would remove food and healthcare from desperate people, deeply harming the UK's reputation. Greek police fired tear gas to disperse demonstrators earlier, demonstrators who were throwing petrol bombs as mass protests to mark the second anniversary of the country's worst rail disaster were marred by violence. Dozens of hooded protesters clashed with security forces as they attempted to storm the barricades in front of Parliament in central Athens. Hundreds of thousands of people have been taking part in countrywide demonstrations demanding justice for the crash that left 57 people dead and dozens more injured. Now, an inquiry concluded on Thursday the collision was caused by human error, poor maintenance and inadequate staffing, and that the safety gaps that caused the crash have not yet been filled. And Pope Francis, who has been critically ill in hospital for 2 weeks, has had what's been described as an isolated breathing crisis. The Vatican says the pontiff has received non-invasive mechanical ventilation to help him breathe as he continues to battle double pneumonia. A statement says the Pope is alert, but his prognosis remains guarded. Francis was admitted to Rome's Gemelli Hospital on the 14th of February with a severe respiratory infection that triggered other complications. And there's the latest headlines. I'll be back with more just after 9 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, over the next hour, we're going to bring you some live panel and guest reaction to that bombshell breakdown in peace talks between President Trump and President Zelensky earlier this evening in the White House. Some truly remarkable scenes. Now, we're going to show you those scenes in a second, and let's quickly remind ourselves of the full, frank and painfully awkward exchange that I think historians will still be talking about decades from now. Check this out.
Well, if I didn't align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say, really terrible things about Putin and then say, "Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal?" It doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America. And for the good of the world, I'm aligned with the world. And I want to get this thing over with. You see the hatred he's got for Putin. It's very tough for me to make a deal with that kind of hate. He's got tremendous hatred. And I understand that, but I can tell you the other side isn't exactly in love with, him either. So it's not a question of alignment. I'm aligned with the world. I want to get the thing set. I'm aligned with Europe. I want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I can be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way, so that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
Hey, I want to respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the President of the United States' words mattered more than the President of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014 and 2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
that's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems?
What?
Bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This
a lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire
today.
meeting, you said thank
Even
you.
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can
not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No,
Can
you've
I
done a lot of
answer?
talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning.
I know.
You're not winning this.
I
You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this cabinet.
We gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank you.
president, $350 billion.
You voted
we gave
for
you
your
military
president.
equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this.
Again,
I tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times thank you to American people.
Accept that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on.
I understand, sir.
I think it's
I
very
understand.
important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
thankful.
You're buried there. Your people are dying.
tell you
You're
again,
running low
I
on
know.
soldiers. Listen,
Please,
you're running
Mr.
low on
President.
soldiers. It would be a damn good thing.
Mr.
And
President.
then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I wanted this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't
it doesn't
with
matter
me.
for you what
That
what
wasn't
this
with me.
means. It
That was
wasn't
with
you.
a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person.
But this
That
is
was
your,
with,
this
that was
is
with
your
Obama.
president. It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry.
It's going to be a tough deal to make, because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia. The 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is, I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think?
What's this negotiation?
This is going to be great television, I will say that. We'll see what we can do about putting it together.
Thank you, sir. I know this is an idea. Gotta come up. Gotta come up. And I need the back of your chair.
We'll see, I don't know.
Scenes there in the White House. Let's get the thoughts right now from our panel tonight. Political commentator Aman Bogle and media strategist Andy Twelves. Aman, initial reactions to that, because obviously you go online, a lot of heated debates, some people saying Trump and Vance are bullies and they rounded on Zelensky. Others are saying, you know, Zelensky didn't really read the room as well as maybe Keir Starmer did yesterday. What's your initial reaction?
I think I quite agree with what you tweeted earlier, Matt, that Zelensky was so bad he made Starmer look like James Bond. But more than that, I would say, look, we saw a real difference between the Trump administration, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, living in the real world, dealing with the very harsh realities of war and what it brings and what it's costing the American taxpayer, and what this cloud cuckoo land that a lot of our politicians seem to live in, that no matter what happens, we must continue this endless, war. They're clueless. What happens after this war doesn't end? What happens after the US doesn't supply the machinery and the money that has been going to Ukraine? Look, the whole idea is, as Prime Minister Modi said, I think 2 years ago now, this is not the era of war. As J.D. Vance was saying, this is the era of diplomacy. And I think when you saw Zelensky there, sitting there and challenging J.D. Vance's idea of talking diplomacy, that's what really kicked it off. And this showed a real transparent mirror of what Zelensky is there tonight as a real entitled comedian.
Andy?
Well, I think, it's difficult to watch, really. I'm surprised that the aides let it go on for that long. That was an excruciating 10 minutes for most people, and, we're reasonably removed from it. Could you imagine if you were a displaced Ukrainian watching that? I think, Zelensky probably didn't take the best attitude in there, but I am shocked at the way that Vance and Trump acted. Like, this, at the end of the day, is a real war. The threat is extremely real. Going back almost, over a decade to the annexation of Crimea, the Russian threat is extremely real. And I think, disputes like this, as funny as they are, and Trump big own on social media, the threat is real, and this is quite a reductionist kind of discussion. This shouldn't have happened in public. These discussions should have been happening in private, with actual diplomatic relations being enacted, not in the middle of a press conference.
But surely there is a view that had Zelensky read the room in terms of, we all have a sense as to what Trump's buttons are. Had he perhaps read the room a little bit better, it might not have escalated to that point. I mean, watching it back now, it strikes me that actually, some of the commentary today has suggested J.D. Vance basically started the intensity of that discussion. But actually, watching it back now, I mean, Zelensky did ask some pretty direct questions to Vance and Trump in the White House, and knowing how Trump is likely to react. I mean, in essence, he was poking the bear.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, Vance, he's not an experienced diplomat. I mean, he was a VC before he was a senator. He doesn't have great diplomatic ability. And obviously, Trump is president, and he's done this before. But really, they should have known better to act this out on the world stage.
On the contrary.
Well, let's hold that thought, because after the break, we're going to be joined live on the show tonight by the former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett, to offer his perspective on the unbelievable fallout that we've witnessed in Washington tonight. Is this actually the beginning of something much broader, a new era in global politics? Don't move a muscle. We're going to be here in a couple of minutes with some fresh perspective. Thank you. We're going to...
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to a friend of mine, friend of the programme now, and that is Katie Nicholl. Katie is the role correspondent at Vanity Fair, and she has got a tale to tell. And this tale began, well, here we are on Valentine's Day, Katie, and this was 2 years ago, and this was a horror story we're talking about.
Yeah, it was a bit of a horror story. It wasn't the Valentine's I'd wanted or expected. I got a call from the Royal Free. I'd been in for an MRI earlier on in the January, and for my liver, and I got a call saying that I had cholangiocarcinoma, which I had no idea what it was.
I have no idea what it is.
I know. Well, Dora, who is my surgeon, who...
No, this is your surgeon. It's a very important lady, and this is Dr. Dora. And you really did do the explorer bit. You had to go in there and cut out this cancer.
Yeah, correct.
But tell us what sort of cancer this is.
So this is a primary liver cancer that arises from the bile duct of the liver. So it's not a metastatic coming from elsewhere, it's a primary. It doesn't arise from the hepatocyte itself. I mean, imagine that the liver is like a red thing, and inside it growing something like a green tree with a lot of branches. So within those branches, we have the epithelial cells, the bile duct cells, and this is where this cancer comes from.
I felt that I was possibly perimenopausal. I was getting these heart palpitations. I was getting really, really bad sense of indigestion, but nothing that was making me overly concerned. But I was with a girlfriend, and she just said, "Are you all right?" And I burst into tears. I said, "You know, I just don't feel myself." And she said, "Just go see your GP." And I did.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, joining us right now to get more reaction to those remarkable historic scenes in the White House today is the former head of the British Army, Lord Richard Dannett. Lord Dannett, thank you for joining us. If we could just, first of all, get your initial reaction to some of those scenes today and how you've processed a remarkable 10 minutes in the Oval Office.
Well, Matt, good evening. What a Greek tragedy we saw played in front of us. Frankly, I suggest that the villain is J.D. Vance. I think the hero is Volodymyr Zelensky. And for a while during that exchange, Donald Trump sat there almost in judgment, listening to what the two sides were saying. And then, of course, there was a moment that Zelensky just got under Trump's skin, and Donald Trump then took off. But, you know, you stand back in horror and say, "My goodness, what a way to run a war." Zelensky came with the hope of, not the hope, but under some pressure to sign this mineral deal, which I think many of us are a little bit uncomfortable with anyway. I mean, when a country like the United States gives support to something like the Ukraine, you know, given not to count the cost, fighting not to heed the wounds. I mean, that's something which we all understand, but the Americans wanted something back from this, something transactional back. And Zelensky had gone across and prepared to do that deal, but my goodness, that blew up in his face. I think one of the interesting things is when a few days ago Trump called Zelensky a dictator, that didn't play well in the US polls. Social media didn't look kindly on that. I wonder what the social media in the United States is saying today, just this moment, about Trump's performance and J.D. Vance's performance. I think that they'll take quite a hit in the polls. And I hope that Trump and Vance might just reflect for a moment that they pushed Zelensky too hard. Zelensky is a man who's leading a country doing his best, and goodness, he needs support, not to be kicked in the butt like he was.
Lord Dannatt, we did hear Zelensky make the point about security guarantees, which obviously seems to be the real sticking point when it comes to the possibility of some kind of ceasefire. Zelensky making the point to Trump and Vance that Putin has a record of reneging on past deals. Do you think, though, had Zelensky perhaps managed Trump and Vance a little better, that he might have got to that conversation about security guarantees? I compare Zelensky's handling of Trump, for example, today with Keir Starmer's yesterday, and by all accounts, Keir Starmer seemed to do a pretty good job at understanding the buttons that tend to erupt around Donald Trump and how to handle him and the things he likes, and pandering to him a little bit. Zelensky clearly came in today with a very different approach, and one that clearly did not work at all.
Yes, I understand that point, and I think it's a fair one. But I think, don't forget, Keir Starmer yesterday was a third party involved in this war. He was prepared to have an objective discussion with Donald Trump about what America would do, what Europe would do, what Britain would contribute. So there was a third party point of view. Zelensky's point of view is a first party point of view. He is a participant in this war, and I think it's important to remember Zelensky was not talking in his native tongue. Keir Starmer was talking English to Trump and to J.D. Vance and others he talked to yesterday. But Zelensky had the difficulty of having to speak in a tongue that was not natural to him. Yes, he may have misread the room, but he's a man who's been under pressure for 3 years leading a country in a bloody war. Tremendous number of his soldiers have been killed, huge number have been maimed. If there's a bit of emotion behind him, not very far under the skin, frankly, you can't blame him. I go back to what I said to start with. J.D. Vance started this argument. Donald Trump sat there for a while quite quietly. But Zelensky took the bait and he went for it. And frankly, I can't blame him. But at the end of the day, I just hope they all stand back over the next few hours and think, wow, goodness, what have we just done? Have we handed a huge open goal to Vladimir Putin? Because at the end of the day, whatever America thinks about Europe, for us Brits, for us America, for us Europeans, this is really important business. Do we want an invigorated, aggressive Putin's Russia pressing further into Ukraine and then pressing goodness knows where else? This is a bad day for diplomacy, and I just hope that Trump steps back and thinks again.
Just briefly, if I may, when we wake up tomorrow, perhaps we'll get that reset that you point to, but perhaps not. Perhaps this is the reality now, unfortunately, as of where we are. How do things progress from here on then? Because you've got a lot of European leaders tonight expressing outrage at what they've seen in the White House. Zelensky and Trump have never looked further apart. The idea of a ceasefire with some kind of security guarantee with US troops or some sort of US presence on the ground looks remote as far as I can see. Where do we go now?
Well, tonight is Friday, as far as I can recall, and certainly a little bit earlier in Friday in Washington. The summit that Keir Starmer has called with other European leaders is on Sunday. They used to say a week is a long time in politics. I think a day is a very long time in fighting a war. Let's just see what happens in the next few hours. Let's see what happens when everybody has slept on it and where we are tomorrow morning. I hope that there are cooler heads offering wiser counsel that Keir Starmer and other European leaders can make sense of on Sunday when they have the summit. Because at the end of the day, as I said a moment or two ago, our security in Europe is absolutely critical to this. But we do need the United States to remain a firm partner within NATO and to provide that backstop to whatever might or might not happen if there is a ceasefire in Ukraine. And there was a point that was just picked up in that exchange earlier when someone said a ceasefire is not a peace agreement. And that is absolutely right. Stopping the shooting for a while is one thing, but coming to a peace agreement is quite another. And that's going to be a very, very long way away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time and insight as always. Let's turn to get the thoughts of tonight's panel: political commentator Arman Bogle and media strategist Andy Twells. Arman, Lord Dannatt, they're suggesting that fundamentally J.D. Vance was I don't want to use the word villain, but was the guy who got this one wrong, and actually Zelensky, we need to cut him a break given the immense pressure that he's under.
Well, I would argue that I think General Dannatt needs to have another look at the video we just saw at the beginning of the show. All J.D. Vance was talking about was the need for diplomacy. And if Zelensky was at all a serious statesman, he would have said, yes, you know what, enough of my young men have been killed, enough of your money has been spent on fighting for the rights of Ukraine, and yes, let's start talking about diplomacy. After all, this is nothing more than what was a civil war that has become a border war that is on the verge, if nothing happens properly now, as Trump is suggesting, into World War III. And that's exactly what Zelensky ended up threatening the US with, that this was going to come to their shores. That's not a sign of a statesman.
Andy, the question as to, well, what on earth happens on Monday morning as everybody's going to wake up and have to figure out, well, are we going to move forward to something, and what does that thing look like? I mean, where do we go from here? This is uncharted territory.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I think Lord Dannatt mentioned on Sunday morning it's Trump's call with a lot of the European leaders, and that has gone from really kind of figuring out where the peacemaking kind of process is going to go to really whether or not the Western alliance is going to keep together. Because if today's performance is anything to go on, the European Union will likely fracture and stand with Ukraine and kind of stand against Trump. As if you think back to his first term, they were reasonably hostile. J.D. Vance, poked the bear in Munich and at the AI summit a couple of weeks ago.
But if you've got the Europeans standing with Ukraine and maybe the Americans start pulling back, pulling away, that is not a viable, currently, that is not a viable firewall against Putin. I mean, there is, the Europeans will be smashed apart.
I was in Estonia a few years ago, and I visited our forward settlement of British forces as part of NATO. And I saw that, and you know what? One of the commanding officers said to me, look, we are a tripwire. If Putin comes racing into Estonia, we're nothing but a tripwire, and it'll take around 2 weeks for NATO forces to mobilise enough strength to respond to that, and that's what we're dealing with there. Look, it's
not only that, you're dealing with European nations who have historically underinvested in their army and military, and even Keir Starmer saying, well, we'll increase to 2.5%.
Even if you come back,
is nowhere near
even
enough.
If you come back to our country, Matt, the UK, right now you can fit the British Army in Wembley, including the tanks.
Well, warfare's changed.
No, it hasn't changed. It hasn't changed.
With the introduction of drone warfare and cyber warfare, we also have significantly less ships with ships with...
If it had changed...
we have less wooden ships now than we do
years ago. Let's hold our own fire in the studio, because we've got a lot more to come on this remarkable meeting between President Zelensky and President Trump in the White House coming after the break. You're going to want to hear from some of the people we've got coming on board in a couple of minutes, because this is a real important moment in global politics. So I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Unsettled across many parts of the Mediterranean, some heavy rain, also some thunderstorms, particularly affecting parts of Spain. Some heavy showers for Madeira and parts of Tenerife, and some heavy and prolonged spells of potentially thundery rain, particularly across southeastern parts of Spain. Some heavy showers affecting Nice and also Rome, parts of the Adriatic coastline, but largely settled across Greece. And it is largely an improving picture as we head into next week, with the best of the temperatures once again across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
so many people I know this applies to. We are terrified of driving in that because you're literally getting blinded now. What's going on here?
You are. I'm going to be a little bit contentious, though, and say that bright headlights have actually come about in order to make roads safer. Because if, like me, you've had experience of driving older cars, you'll know just how appalling the older style headlights can be. And in fact, you can't actually see very clearly the road ahead. So the new xenon and LED headlight technology actually stemmed from a racing background when cars were racing at night in order to make the roads brighter. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a problem for drivers, but I do sort of think that, this possibly could be part of the whole culture of people liking to have something to complain about. And they kind of need to learn, and I think this really should be part of the driving test. You need to learn how to drive at night and not to look directly into the headlights that are coming towards you.
But the RSC survey also shows, Amanda, that it suggests that there's been at least 200 road accidents which could be directly attributed to people being dazzled by the light. So that can't be good.
No, exactly. And I mean, I'm not belittling the accidents, and I'm certainly not belittling the people who have problems, particularly things like cataracts, which can really be a problem for nighttime driving. And it is a really serious problem when it comes to safety, admittedly. But again, I just feel that, bright headlights actually essentially make the road safer. We've got far more people travelling on the roads these days than we've ever had at any point in history. And so by virtue of the fact, we are going to see these numbers rising because, of course, there are going to be more people who are going to be dazzled by the headlights.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, everybody, to State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we have been witnessing unprecedented scenes today between President Trump and President Zelensky in the Oval Office in the White House. That press conference, traditionally held afterwards, was, of course, cancelled, and Zelensky was asked to leave the White House. The reaction is obviously gripping world politics and the commentariat tonight. But one question I wanted to ask, which I think is a really important question, is what's the mood on the ground in Ukraine among people who have been watching this remarkable exchange? And tonight I'm delighted to welcome former presidential advisor to Zelensky, Alexander Rodniansky. Alexander, could you give us a sense as to what the mood music is in Ukraine after these truly remarkable scenes in the White House?
Yeah, so everybody's obviously taken by surprise, to say the least. Everyone is disturbed and frustrated and shocked by what they have seen, and the discourse, the rhetoric, the relationship in general, the bad blood, as it seems to be, between the two presidents. So the mood is still hard to estimate, hard to judge what it is exactly. Everyone is adjusting to the new reality. But people are obviously essentially unified in some sense around the president, and the feeling that they need to hold together even more in light of the fact that U.S. support might be dwindling.
I mean, listening to the debate unfold in the White House, we firstly heard the point about needing security guarantees with any ceasefire, any agreement with Putin. We don't seem to be now getting any answers to those security guarantees. I don't think that will be forthcoming anytime soon. But also, we saw that really big bust up over the idea that diplomacy can essentially solve this war. And it seemed to be the mentioning of diplomacy by J.D. Vance that really seemed to rile President Zelensky. Could you give us any insight as to what was going on there exactly?
Well, I don't think it was just in particular that comment on diplomacy. I think it was a combination of everything, and the body language that you could see from the cameras was evident throughout, before that comment, after the comment. So I think there's more to that. It's just the general dynamic between the two administrations is clearly not the way it was before with the previous administration. But let's just leave that aside. I think clearly any war will have to end, and this one including in diplomacy or some sort of negotiation process. We were hoping that this would start sooner rather than later, so in particular now, perhaps in the next few months. But it now seems that, well, it's unclear. We'll have to wait for the actions. Right now, what we're seeing is a very different rhetoric, a very different relationship between the leaders. The US seems to be changing course to some extent. But again, we need to wait for the actions to actually see, is the support going to change? Is the support going to be diminished for Ukraine? Are we going to see what the outcome is on the front line as a result of that? I can tell you that the immediate effect is already there because our soldiers, our people are seeing and listening to what's happening, and obviously that affects their morale, and that doesn't help their morale. It's actually degrading for the morale, so that has an immediate effect on the dynamic of the front line, if you want.
We've just been speaking to Lord Richard Dannett, the former head of the British Army, who basically made the point that we're not really going to know where we are for a few days at least. We're heading into a weekend. How are things going to look on Monday morning after everybody's had a chance to perhaps have a break and regroup and think about where things are going to move in the future? I mean, where do you think now things are going to move in the coming weeks? Because Donald Trump's put out a statement on Truth Social saying President Zelensky is welcome back when he's ready to talk about peace. It doesn't seem that that's going to be happening anytime soon, certainly not in the next few days and weeks. So what happens from tonight onwards? I mean, where do we go now in terms of the war and the discussions around a peace deal?
Well, again, there's many possibilities here. So one possibility, of course, is that we actually see a diminishing support on the part of the US for Ukraine. And that will obviously change the bargaining power that we can use, Ukraine can have in the negotiation process, if you want, or at the table. Our position was not very good to start with at this present moment, because obviously everybody knows that over the last 1.5 years, the dynamic at the front line has been in favor of the Russian side rather than Ukraine overall. So now if the US were to be not there anymore as our partner and a big, essentially, supporter, that's going to worsen our position even further. So that might perhaps mean that what will, as a result, come out of this is a change in our leadership. There might be a political crisis. So I don't want to estimate or make these projections at this point. It's basically just speculation. But you're asking me what's going to happen. Well, the number one answer to that is there's a lot of uncertainty now as to what is going to happen. And it really depends on how things play out and on the actual actions that we will see and the change in policy that we will perhaps see coming from the White House.
Just very, very briefly, if I may, is there anything that can come out of this European meeting on Sunday that could be useful or significant?
Yes, absolutely. So one other big question right now is, of course, if the US were to really step back its support, can Europe come in and fill the void that is? Can Europe substitute for everything that the US has been giving and providing? And that is really the big question. Will this crisis now that's unfolding in front of our eyes be enough to somehow provoke that reaction on behalf of Europe to really come together and consolidate? My feeling is, unfortunately, that this is unlikely just because of the bureaucracy and the slow adjustment process that we always see in Europe to any event, and this one included. Okay. But who knows? We'll see.
Well, thank you, Alexander Rodnienski, for joining us this evening. We really appreciate your insight on this important day. Now, we're going to continue to get reaction to the extraordinary meeting in the White House today, just after the break in a couple of minutes. So stay right there, stay with us, and we'll keep analysing this very significant moment in global politics.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the weekend, we can expect some cold and frosty mornings with some fog in places, cloudier in the north at times, but otherwise high pressure largely building, which means lots of settled and fine conditions to come. And we've ended the day too on plenty of fine and clear weather, but a frontal system just edging its way into the northwest at times, so turning cloudier here overnight with some outbreaks of rain and some fairly blustery winds too across the far north of Scotland. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies. That means temperatures are going to dip away quickly, turning rather cold overnight, likely to see some frost and some fog by the time we reach the morning, possibly even some freezing fog where we see temperatures drop below zero. So to start the weekend on Saturday, a little bit of a mixed bag across Scotland. It is going to be rather damp at times, still rather blustery around northwestern coast, starting to turn a little bit brighter across the northwest, though we can't rule out a few showers moving through here. Quite a damp start across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, perhaps some higher cloud making things not turn quite as chilly, but elsewhere across England and Wales, another chilly start to the day, likely to see some frost and fog in places, but that should clear rather nicely through the course of the morning, allowing plenty of sunshine to start the day and eventually brightening up across Scotland too with some sunny spells here. But where we see this band of cloud and possibly some light rain at times, that's set to stick there through the afternoon and perhaps bringing in some hazy sunny spells elsewhere too. But temperatures fairly similar to where they've been to today, so highs of around 10 to 11 Celsius. Now for the second half of the weekend, once again a cold and frosty start, particularly across the south and southeast, and once again we'll start to see a build of higher cloud for northern areas, but it should stay largely dry. Away from the northwest though, where once again we can expect some outbreaks of rain, and into next week high pressure sticking around, so once again lots of fine settled weather and some sunshine. Bye bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to State of the Nation tonight on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, we've already heard from experts in both Ukraine and Britain tonight after Donald Trump and President Zelensky had tentative peace talks in Washington. Those talks obviously broke down in spectacular fashion in front of the cameras. Let's focus in on a couple of the key moments now, starting with Trump's accusation that Zelensky is gambling with World War III.
Not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Ooh, it's awkward, isn't it? It's like watching a married couple fight in front of you. It's just very, very difficult to watch. Let's get the thoughts of tonight's panel, political commentator Aman Bogle and media strategist Andy Twelves. Aman, we've just heard from Lord Richard Dannett, former head of the British Army. We've also heard from one of President Zelensky's advisors there, who I think was sort of hinting maybe at a brewing political crisis in Ukraine after these scenes, but maybe I'm wrong. What have you heard tonight that you think has been particularly significant?
Well, I think the biggest thing that's come out following this meeting at the Oval Office is that I've just heard that the US is now announcing an investigation of fraud and waste in all the aid that has been given to Ukraine. This is what's coming on the wires. Yeah,
and this is tonight. This is a new announcement that the US, like they've been investigating waste and fraud in the United States, are now going to be looking at the Ukraine money.
Exactly. And look, this is about America finally putting not just the American national interest first, but the interest of world peace and, people wanting to get along with each other. I mean, let's break this down, Matt. Just last year, the EU nations have bought more than 20 billion euros worth of Russian gas. Now, if they're funding the Russian war machine at the same time as supposedly fighting this proxy war, who's going to end up winning? Yeah. And who is the UK buying Russian petroleum from now? There you go. So,
Well, Andy, there is a point here, isn't there, that for years now, particularly European nations like Germany and others have become dependent upon Russia for energy, and at the same time trying to position themselves as these sort of morally righteous, anti-Russian, patriots. But actually, I mean, Europe has made a series of disastrous policy decisions. And the idea that, as we've heard tonight, the idea that Europe could maybe go it alone without America seems pretty fanciful to me.
Well, absolutely, and that's what makes this, even more, terrifying, if nothing else. The fact that, I haven't seen this story about the new US announcement, but the idea that they're almost doubling down on, on their kind of skirmish in the White House today. I think everyone does need to step back and think about the bigger picture. Both the European future and the world future, because if the US and Europe don't get on the same side, clearly on the same side here, we can't just let Russia continue the way they are. We either need to broker a peace deal or really, sort out a real defence. Because as I think we were saying in the break, the British operating base near Russia, it's a tripwire. It's not a clear defence. We really need to sort this out and really take a step back and forget about the dramatics and go, no, this is world peace at stake.
On February 21st in 2022, Russia amassed 60,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. And what have we seen since, both in Europe and in the UK? Have we seen a remilitarization of our defence? We cannot, first of all, literally beg the US to supply our defence supplies. I mean, look at Trident alone. And then when the US says, well, hold on a second, you should be pulling your own weight, and then say, then cry foul. This is not how the real world works. And beyond that, look at the global south. Whilst we have taken on far more debt to absorb the higher, 200% higher gas prices that we've seen since the Ukraine-Russia war, what about the rest of the world? Is Ukraine the only conflict? Is Europe not being selfish in looking at it that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
The fact is that United Kingdom today is the biggest buyer of refined Indian petroleum, petrol and diesel. And you know what? Which is that crude? It's Russian crude.
Well, I tell you, the debate over what we've seen today in the White House is going to continue and rumble on across Western democracies. We're really in the middle of a reset moment, truly historic point in the evolution of Western politics. Now, what we've got coming up right after this show on GB News is Patrick Christis. Patrick, what have you got on your show this evening? I suspect you might also be touching on those remarkable scenes in Washington today.
Absolutely, Matt. Yes, fantastic show from you. We are live with the studio audience right here in Paddington. Yes. Absolutely wonderful. This is the hottest ticket in town, the way to kickstart your Friday night, and we've got it all. Wow. Oh, my gosh. Have you ever seen anything quite like that Trump-Zelensky press conference? Zelensky's been booted out. What do we all make of that? Who's Team Trump? Yeah. Who's Team Zelensky? OK, all right. Well, it's going to make for a fantastic show. We're also going to be talking about Labour's obsession with Islamophobia. When is David Lammy going to resign over foreign aid and the Trump issue? And do you think that trans police officers should be strip-searching women? Anyone? No. I didn't think so. See you in a second.
Splendid stuff, Patrick. Wow, that impromptu poll is the opposite of what I've been reading on X and social media this evening. Well, that's all coming up after the weather. I'm going to be back next Wednesday at 8 to 9 p.m. right here on State of the Nation. I'm Matt Goodwin. This has been State of the Nation, speaking up for you, the forgotten majority. See you soon.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head towards the weekend, we can expect some cold and frosty mornings with some fog in places, cloudier in the north at times, but otherwise high pressure largely building, which means lots of settled and fine conditions to come. And we've ended the day too on plenty of fine and clear weather, but a frontal system just edging its way into the northwest at times, so turning cloudier here overnight with some outbreaks of rain and some fairly blustery winds too across the far north of Scotland. But elsewhere, plenty of clear skies. That means temperatures